Finance Committee public hearing to order, please. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The town warrant is up back on the table if you haven't already gotten a copy. Good evening. As we go through the articles, if you wish to speak, could you please go to the microphone in the center, state your name and address, and then give us either your comments or your questions. Tonight, what I'd like to do, to make it a little bit easier, is to take Articles 1 and 6 together. 1 is for and 6 is basically opposed. And I'd like to start with that article. And first is Article number 1. To see if the town will vote to appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds an amount of money to be expended under the direction of the town manager and the high school building committee for the purposes of paying the cost of designing, permitting, constructing, equipping and furnishing a new high school, including the payment of costs for any necessary site improvements. Said high school to be located at 159 Church Street, Wilmington, which school facility shall have an anticipated useful life as an educational facility for the instruction of school children for at least 50 years, and for which the town may be eligible for a school construction grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any project cost the town incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town. Any grant that the town may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 150 to 47/100% of eligible approved project costs as determined by the MSBA, or 2, the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA, or take any other action related thereto. And Article 6 is a petitioned article to see whether the town will vote to preserve Wilmington High School and prevent it from being demolished or take any other action related to, petitioned by Kevin McDonald and others. I'd like to start, Mr. Kyra, or
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, with your permission, I would like to introduce the superintendent of schools who serves as the high school building committee chair, just for opening remarks, and then again, with your permission, we would ask you to allow the professionals that we've hired, particularly Dora Whittier, the architect, along with representatives from Jocelyn Lesser, the OPM, to make a presentation. I'll also note that the construction manager is here as well, representing Gilbane. But with your permission, Mrs. Benton.
Mrs. Benton? Cheers, please.
Good evening. I come before you this evening to seek support for a new high school. The new Wilmington High School will be built on the same grounds as the current school. The building will increase in size from 154,000 to 192,000 square feet, and it will accommodate 960 students. It will enjoy state-of-the-art 21st century structural heating, air conditioning, technology, lighting, accessibility, ventilation, health, and safety facilities. A key goal of this new high school is to meet the needs of today's educational program and to provide flexibility and functionality for changes in enrollment, the use of technology, teacher collaboration, curriculum, and scheduling. Educational programs and instructional practices have changed in the 60 years since Wilmington High School was built, and they will continue to change. Today's schools must accommodate the growing use of technology, appropriate space for special education and student support services, classrooms that are right-sized and flexible for large and small group instruction, in interdisciplinary work, and functional science labs. A new building design will feature a more efficient floor plan for improved delivery of the educational program and for day-to-day operations. It will address the physical deficiencies in Wilmington High School that currently impact the educational process, including undersized and outdated classrooms, special ed areas and science labs that are cramped, and health service facilities that are in too small a room. Classroom areas will include space for small and large group instruction, more effective use of instructional technology, and teacher collaboration. Our new high school plan includes suspended walking track with gym that supports our wellness curriculum, a large interior courtyard connecting to classrooms and media center and cafeteria, a state-of-the-art auditorium with the capacity of having all of our musicians on the stage, flexible small learning communities, large classrooms to support 20th century teaching and learning, flexible up-to-date science classrooms for high-quality science education, enhanced locker rooms and weight rooms under the gymnasium, a second-story fitness room with an outside balcony, a media production room for hosting over 3 classes of students at one time for lecture, productions, and distant learning opportunities, the latest technology including wireless infrastructure to support 21st century teaching and learning throughout the building, improved parking and student drop-off areas, additional tennis courts, practice field, turf football field supporting multiple sports in our athletic program, integrated teaching planning areas, increased space to support in-house special education programs, expanded and improved visual arts, business and family consumer science classrooms, flexibility for furnishing and technology to be rearranged with ease and speed, and space for students to work quietly and reflectively, spaces to operate small groups as well as large group gatherings. This Wilmington High School building project is significant to each and every resident of the town of Wilmington. This project is more than a school building. It is a development of a major long-term asset for the town. The decisions to be made will affect young people's lives for generations to come. After all, the residents of Wilmington will be making an investment in our students' future. I am confident we have identified the right option for the town and that it is both fiscally prudent and meets the educational needs of today and tomorrow for the Wilmington community. And now I'd like to introduce Don Walter, who will give an overview of what it will look like.
Thank you, Joanne. Don Walter with Dornwoody Architects. Thank you for allowing us to speak this evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee. I have the pleasure of showing you what this building is going to look like that Joanne so eloquently described. Before we get into the building itself, what I'd like to do is give a quick history so you know this just didn't come out of anywhere. We spent a lot of time doing research and development, which led to the plan that we'll show you here tonight, show you the site and building plans, talk about total project costs. Jeff Luxembourg from Jocelyn Lesser and Mike Cairo will go into that, and then discuss what the next steps are beyond today. In terms of the history, briefly, we went through a site selection process. No fewer than 8 different siting options were reviewed and thoroughly vetted. We went through a conceptual design optioning process where we went and looked at over 20 different design options, which led to a preferred design option in June. In July, the MSBA board, the Mass School Building Authority, who was a funding partner in this project, approved that particular design, which led into schematic design, which you'll see this evening. Went through that schematic site and building design until September, which led us to review with MSBA staff, and then finally, MSBA board, as recently as last Wednesday, approved the schematic design that you're going to see this evening, which is basically the site and building layout, the building imagery, and so forth, which sets the overall project budget. To get into the plan, what I'd like to do is just give you a sense of the overall site. Church Street, Wildwood, Adams down below. The red dots that you see here outlined, that's the existing high school building. Roman House is located right here. The new proposed building located on the north end of the site behind the existing tennis courts. At this larger scale, wanted to show you that up off of Wildwood, there'll also be a new practice field constructed for multiple uses. To zero in on the site specific, just chopping off where the Wildwood site would be, again, you can see the dashed outline of the existing building, and this oval in the center, which is AUL limits. That's activities and use limitation, which was issued by the DEP for an oil spill that occurred back in 1984. Essentially, that oil is encapsulated within the ground and underneath the existing boiler room. When we remove this existing building, once the new building is constructed, that activity and use limitation issued by DEP will still be in force. So essentially what we're doing is we're removing the existing building and we're covering that with a new parking lot. So what's in the ground will remain in the ground in perpetuity. Taking that away, I want to take you quickly through a tour around the site. Again, Roman House is located right here. At the front of the building off of Church Street, there would be a bus, an administrative loop into the building to where the main entrance is located. Down off of Adams Street, there is a primary parent drop-off for students coming into the school, and the main parking lot for staff. Student parking will remain across across from Middlesex. Off of that drop-off, there's a nice plaza with plantings and seating opportunities, and a student entrance to the northwest side of the site, and what we're calling an events entrance to the southwest east side of the site, which will take you into some of the core facilities in the public venues. Also on the site, you'll see tennis courts and basketball courts, which are located up here, being relocated down. The existing baseball field essentially remains in place with some enhancements. The existing stadium will have new synthetic turf field installed, and what happens is that there's a service drive which comes in and services the kitchen and custodial areas of the building, and also allows for emergency access all the way around the building, so there's 360-degree access for emergency vehicles. Going into the building, starting with the first floor, this is that bus drop-off entrance, or the main entrance to the building. This is the student entrance and the events entrance. Starting with the main entrance, you can see to the south, or the lower part of the screen, is the main office to the building, and up to the north is guidance and the health suite. When you come into the main lobby, you immediately encounter the library and media center, and looking through there, you can see a large open outdoor courtyard. So the basic premise of the building is that the circulation is a donut, and when we get to the upper levels, you can see how evident that is, circulating around this outdoor courtyard. If you came in the front door and went left and up the north side of the building, you encounter the alternative education program with access, which allows them to go out into the community. There's also family and consumer science associated with a business class off the courtyard, and associated with the main kitchen, which serves all the students in the cafeteria. If you came in the front door and took a right and walked along the southern end of the building, you can see all along this corridor facing into the courtyard are 3 art rooms with wonderful north-facing light, ambient light for doing art projects. And on the southern side of that corridor, we have the more technological classes, a CAD lab, computer-aided design, a graphics lab, and then the media production room that Joanne mentioned, which is a multi-purpose space which could serve up to 3 classrooms as a tiered lecture hall. It could be a distance learning lab. It could be a place that acts as a small black box theater. If you continue down and get across from the events entrance, you can see there's a new auditorium with a stage which will handle all the strings program, serviced by a full music suite for band and chorus. There's a gymnasium to the upper side, the north side of the auditorium, and then coming in up across from the left is a cafeteria, which actually opens up to the hallway, so it serves double duty as a lobby for these spaces also. So during intermission or before or after events or shows, The cafeteria can be opened up to serve baked goods or to have seating areas. And all of these spaces within the courtyard, around the courts, are coming out after events with some table seating out there. Art students going out into the courtyard to do projects. Students coming out of the media center, small groups or individual study occurring. And then the family and consumer science, we envision a small herb garden perhaps going on out there. And then lastly on this floor, I just want to point out that there's a stair to the back which will take you out towards Alumni Stadium. It'll also take you down to the locker rooms, which are basically this footprint you see of the gymnasium down below. So if we go down that stair, takes you down below, you can see the boys and girls locker rooms, weight room, team room, and all the support space for custodial storage and the boiler. And the way the site works, it slopes from front to back, from Church Street back to the stadium. This will actually be about 6 feet below grade, so it's not a full story below grade, so there's opportunities to bring some natural light into that space too. Now if we go up to the second floor, what you're going to see is that the second floor and the third floor are very similar. In fact, they're almost a direct relationship from the second up to the third, except for a couple of spaces on either end. What this does is this is helping to carry out the educational mission that Joanne mentioned. It also helps makes for efficient design and cost-effective design. The basic premise of this is that we've set up learning communities within the overall footprint. So a basic learning community is 4 classrooms supported by small group spaces and science rooms on the end. And then in between the learning communities are self-contained special ed and teacher planning areas. So the idea behind this is project-based learning, 21st century learning, is to create spaces where a lot of interdisciplinary learning occurs, places where the teacher is not just a lecturer, but teacher is a facilitator and a collaborator with the students, and it encourages students to collaborate with each other. So this, over time, would not necessarily be a department within the school, but could be English, math, social studies, and foreign language within a grouping. And you can see collaboration occurring within those classrooms, in the small group learning spaces in between those classrooms, and because of these notches that we've cut out in the corridor, having small groups of students actually in the corridor. And we'll get to a slide further on. You can see a lot of glass, a lot of transparency. We want to be able to share what's happening within the classrooms with students who may be passing by at any time. So it's a real exciting model, and it's really where education's going today. It's part of the Massachusetts school frameworks. It's so valuable a tool I'm looking forward. So I mentioned the science rooms down this end, some other science labs across from the larger labs, in an outdoor space which allowed for some green roof demonstration and perhaps some more plantings. And then at the opposite end, you can see there's a fitness room overlooking the courtyard. This fitness room is actually located next to the upper level of the gymnasium, which is where the new walking track will be located that Joanne mentioned. So students can come up and get onto the walking track from this stair, which takes you down to the gym and the locker room, or they can go over and utilize the fitness area. So when you go up to the third floor, you can see essentially the same thing. The learning communities around the teacher planning and resource spaces. And I should point out that all the special needs spaces is integrated within the plan. So there's no special education area within the building. You can see SPED self-contained here, but any one of these small group rooms could also act as a special education space. It could also act as a small group space. So all the spaces are intended to be interchangeable. The 4 science classrooms on the end, and one final full-size classroom at this end, and at the opposite end, over the top of the fitness area, would be 2 additional business labs. So while we have business lab down next to food and consumer science, we also have it up in the upper level, again, in that spirit of collaboration, trying to get them more integrated within the general population. And then this is a 3D view of one of the learning communities. You can see around this block here the 4 classrooms. General classroom size is about 850 square feet. The small group learning spaces in between and you can see all the glass and the transparency that we're trying to create. So you get that, that idea of knowing what's happening around you. And then perhaps some of the teacher planning to the right here, and sped resource space. So you start to see how these learning communities will interact with one another. And another important aspect to the 21st century learning and the project-based learning is that you can see all the rooms are set up a little differently. It allows that flexibility for the teachers to set up the room however they want, whether they want to be columns and rows, which is a traditional method, we want to be in small group table methods, set up in a seminar method around a large oval here. So a lot of exciting things we envision happening in this particular arrangement. In terms of what we see the building looking like, we see it as a traditional building being fit within a historic district, but also has an eye on the future. So while this building is intended to be brick and masonry and fit within the scale of the neighborhood, this would be the main entrance view looking from Church Street over the top of the existing tennis courts. You can see a pretty traditional main entrance with the doors on either side. We've got a strong base that runs all the way around the building, which helps to keep the scale of the building down, and it shows a strong support for what happens up above. In this case, you can see this is the administration, the health, guidance and health suite around either side of the main entrance. And then up above are the two levels of science classrooms. And you can see the relationship to the building next to the existing Roman house. And this is the roadway where the bus loop will actually come by. Continuing south on Church Street, you can see we got to the other side of the Roman house. This is the new basketball court location, and the tennis courts continue on south to the right. You're actually looking at where the bus loop comes in and will go back in front of the new building, and you're seeing the new student entrance and starting to see the length of the building as it moves back away from Church Street towards the Alumni Stadium off beyond. And then lastly, if you moved yourself all the way around next to the baseball field, you're standing down the right field line here right now. This is that media production room, the CAD design, and the graphics lab, the community entrance or the events entrance, the student entrance, and then you start to get a real sense of those learning communities up above on two levels, and the resource spaces and the teacher planning spaces in between that support either one of those learning communities. So we think it's a real exciting building from the inside and from the outside. It's also a building that's a good neighbor to the existing neighborhood in the context and the historical nature of the community. So we're just really excited about this particular school and where it might be going. What I'd like to do now is actually turn it over to Jeff Luxembourg from Jocelyn Lesser, who's going to talk a little about the costs.
Good evening, everybody. The total cost of the project has been vetted through the building committee here, but also through the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority. And the total cost of the project is $82,688,115. Of that, $1,125,000 was appropriated previously for the feasibility study and schematic design phase. So the estimated project cost that has to be appropriated at this point is $81,563,115. That amount includes a reimbursement for the MSBA, who reimburses for what are called eligible costs, and there's been an increase in the reimbursement rate from what was in your packet to 55.19%. That included a recalculation of the base rate, which had gone up, plus they're allowing 1.61 for maintenance. They're reflecting on an excellence maintenance program that you have in the schools currently, so that was an increase over what was anticipated, plus 1% for using a SEAM at risk approach to project delivery, which both allows a much better process plus an additional reimbursement rate, plus 2% for quote-unquote green sustainable design if you meet certain LEED type and mass chip standards. And by doing that, you get not only the 2%, but you get long-term energy savings as part of the project. So that is the new rate is now 55.19%. That is on what are called eligible costs. There are certain aspects of a project that are essential to the project that the MSBA just does not fund. For example, taking out vinyl asbestos tile is something they feel that others have taken out of their buildings. So in order to create a level playing field, they exclude the cost of vinyl asbestos tile, for example. Also, some of the elements that are in the program, the elevated track is something that is not something they participate in. The turf field, which is an important aspect of the project for the town of Wilmington, again, not something that they do anywhere in the state kind of thing. The building is fully air-conditioned. There's a sewer extension from the public safety building to the project. That is an off-site improvement, again, something that they would not pay for, and as with the extension to the gas line. So they also set an 8% cap on site costs. This is just with the way they've defined the program throughout the state. 8% is the maximum on the site. Every project I've seen has had to go over that 8%, but again, that's what they offer to participate up to 8% on site cost. Given all of those things, the basis for the grant is $68,840,813, and they've reimbursed the 55.19% of that amount. The effective reimbursement rate, in essence, is 45.9% of the total cost will be funded by the MSBA. So those are a basic run through the numbers. Mike's now going to go through the average cost to the homeowner.
Thank you, Jeff. We've been trying to estimate to the best of our ability what the impact is going to be on the taxpayer. What we've decided to recommend at this point is a 25-year issue, a 25-year bond that we believe, based upon the advice and counsel that we've received from our financial advisors at State Street, that because of the town's strong financial condition, its good operating reserve, its AA+ bond rating, we would likely be able to get a rate at around 3.2% for this 25-year bond. What you have there is what the average taxpayer would pay based on an average residential property value of just over $357,000 and their yearly tax bill of $4,242. We believe over this 25-year period, the cost that would be associated, and this is strictly the cost that would be associated with the construction of the new high school, the borrowing of the $44,190,758 would be $164.14 per year. So that's simply a mathematical exercise in the end where we take the cost over the 25-year period, our estimate, add that total, divide it by 25, and your average cost would be $164.14. A little higher in the beginning, lower in the end. If your property is valued at a higher number, then it'll be proportionately higher. If it's lower, it'll be proportionately lower. I think that's essentially what we have to report with regard to the debt impact and the tax impact on individual taxpayers. Ultimately, as Jeff said, if this goes forward and there are 2 votes required, we're talking about receiving $38 million from the state to do this project. Do you want to do that?
Just lastly, touch on what the next steps are. As I mentioned earlier, we received board approval last Wednesday, November 16th. People don't know as of yet, there's a town vote on December 6th. Town meeting is scheduled for December 10th. Assuming approval at those two, the ballot and the election. We will then go into the development of the design documents, which will take us from December through October of 2012. We'll actually start construction a little bit early, right after the 4th of July next summer with a site package, and then it is anticipated that the school will be ready to be opened by August of 2014.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Mr. O'Reilly?
Yes. Jerry O'Reilly, Wildwood Street, Wilmington. Does the Finance Committee have in place a cost estimate for the removal of the oil plume? And have you ever considered it?
We have not a cost estimate. We've
have
not.
one, yes or no?
We do not have a cost estimate.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Langenfelter?
George Lingenfeld, 11 Concord Street. I don't have any questions, but I have like several comments that I would like people in the town to consider. And I contemplated writing a letter to the editor, but I think that's kind of a pointless gesture at this point. I haven't spent as much time as I'd like to in reviewing what's the current revised A3 REO. It's my understanding that there was an original A3 REO that was prepared that the DEP on audit found technically deficient, and another one was prepared. I didn't really examine that in detail, but I did look at the letter and some correspondence from DEP. In my cursory review of the current A3 REO, I also find that that's technically deficient. I have a copy of the AUL here, and I have a copy of just the cover page of a DEP guidance policy, WC 04160, which is conducting a feasibility evaluation. And I don't see anywhere in the current revised A3 REO a table of contents that addresses the technical feasibility of achieving what's called background. The DEP requires that a technical evaluation be performed to achieve background, and you can't just simply say it'll cost too much. It's kind of an involved process. There's a whole separate document that's about 50 pages long. The gentleman that just spoke had said that the DEP issued and approved the current AUL area. That's actually not technically correct. The DEP doesn't issue AULs. It's a privatized system. An LSP opinion was the regulatory mechanism behind issuing that A3 REO and the AUL. In that A3 REO that Green Environmental prepared, they make some cursory references to the technical feasibility, but they don't have in the table of contents a specific evaluation of the technical feasibility of achieving background. The the AUL itself doesn't necessarily mean that you can just go in and blanket, have a soil management plan, which it calls for, and then do nothing about the soil. In my opinion, the AUL is really geared more towards, say we wanted to revamp the boiler system, we had to take out the boiler floor, then the AUL would allow that activity to occur without necessarily removing all the soil. In the case that we're proposing, which is one of the things that I have against the project, I actually would like to see a new high school, but I would like to see a new high school that had more planning. I'd like to see a high school with like a swimming pool and some other amenities, which we really can't afford right now, which is another, I'm going to jump around a little bit because I'm a better writer than I am a speaker. But there are some pretty serious economic times going on right now, unprecedented, and I just don't believe the news reports. I don't think we're in a double recession or double dip recession. I think we're bordering on a depression, and I don't really see it improving anytime soon. That's another thing to consider about moving forward with this. And I apologize for jumping around a little bit, but I have some technical concerns that we hear, and I'm not trying to bash anybody, we hear, oh, we've done all this work and we've moved forward and we've hired the professionals, and everybody's got their own little niche in what they want to have done here. And I think that we need, all the school talks about having a 50-year investment. I think that if we are going to have a 50-year school, in my opinion, we haven't put in the thought and consideration for that. I think we can do better than the current proposal. That's just my opinion. Jumping around again, I apologize. When I went to high school, we had other languages that they don't offer now. We talk about the 21st century education. We used to have German and Russian. We don't have those. Those are very important languages. I don't see any point in having a new language lab if we're not teaching those languages. There was some discussion in some of the public hearings about possibly having Chinese. Well, that's probably a good idea because of the nature of the world economy right now. But as a person that can read Russian, I can tell you that I'm not going to try to read Chinese. It's not enough of it you can learn. It's like 5,000 separate characters. And so I don't think as an American English speaker, learning Chinese other than for diplomatic purposes is really going to be practical. But understanding and speaking German and Russian, which are two very important European languages that the high school used to offer, and I've also, it was a letter to the editor, I think Suzanne Sullivan wrote it, and I can't address this as just reading the letter to the editor, not any personal knowledge, but it's my understanding that some of the programs aren't funded at the middle school. We have labs at the middle school that are underutilized. I don't know if that's true or not, but I saw a letter to the editor to that effect. Maybe someone can address that. We're talking about building lots of labs in the new high school. Well, that's great, but if we're not funding the programs appropriately, then it's not going to help us to have a shiny lab if we don't have the teachers and instruction, the courses to go with them. And I can't say that that's not going to be the case. I don't know. I'm just raising the concern. But, and again, I apologize to jump around a little bit to get back to my point. I would like to see better. For a 50-year investment and all of this money, we have a structurally sound building that's $17 million. So if you take $17 million away from 38, that puts you down closer to the 20 million range. And I just don't think that's the right decision for this time, for the town. There's no specific environmental danger that I'm aware of with the current proposal, to get back to my final point here. But in my cursory review, I don't think it's technically sufficient. It does not include a feasibility evaluation of achieving background. And then the AUL that we currently have is really geared more towards, as I said, a more minor construction project, not a wholesale removal of the school, because in my cursory review, I didn't see, other than in passing reference, comments associated with a soil management plan and health and safety plan. So I believe that if we do take down the school, there are going to be environmental groups in town that are going to petition the DEP to enforce their own policy, which was stated the DEP had nothing to do with the AUL, that's an LSP, but the DEP does have a guidance document policy that I could tell you as an LSP that have written REOs, and I have most of my work has been assisting other LSPs, but the DEP does enforce this technical evaluation that you can achieve background, and that you can't just say it costs too much. You have to have a real evaluation. And on a project of the scale of this, we're spending $80 million, $500,000 or $1 million for cleanup probably wouldn't be a sufficient reason not to clean it up the background. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. McDonald.
Good evening. Kevin McDonald, Wilmington. I'm the other petitioner who has the other article that is in opposition to this to actually preserve the high school. And so some of my comments I'll make later that are relative to that. With regard to this proposal, I have some questions. I actually asked some of these questions at previous meetings and didn't get an answer, but Mr. Walter was going to get back to me on that.
Mr. McDonald, you can bring up Article 6 because we are going to do them jointly with 1 and 6. So
Okay.
if you have any comments on 6, you may bring them up.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walter, can you tell us how much it's going to cost to demolish the high school and haul it away? Actually, one thing I'm actually kind of disturbed by tonight is the word estimate when we're this far along in the project. We see estimates on financial matters, and now I'm hearing estimates on cost to demolish the building, so I would like some hard numbers if it's possible.
We're actually going to find the cost of demolition, but the word estimate is a commonly used word in the construction industry all throughout the development of a design right up through until bid date. You don't know what something's going to precisely cost till you actually bid it, but the numbers that we develop are put together with the expertise of our cost estimator, who not only works for us, but works for many other architects doing a lot of public school work here in Massachusetts. And you're not just relying upon our cost estimator. We also have Gilbane Construction, who was brought on board early for this project, which was an excellent move by the town. As the construction manager, they're a partner moving from when they were hired forward through to building the project. So they're also estimating the cost of construction throughout the design process, throughout the development of documents, till we get to the actual bidding of the project. So that's a term that's used in the construction industry. So that's why the word estimate is used. For sure. We'll get you the answer on the demolition cost.
There's two parts to it. There's hazmat abatement, which we would have to do regardless, and demolition. And the cost, estimated cost is $904,000 for those items, and then with the appropriate markups that are required as part of that, it's $1,088,226. Again, that includes both demolition and hazardous material abatement.
Okay, thank you.
So just so I'm clear, the total cost is $1,888,000? Okay.
Mr. McDonald?
I'm just making sure that they're set on that number. Is there a typo? Are you set on that number?
That is the amount for eligible abatement. As I indicated earlier, there was the VAT tile that is an exclusion.
Can you interpret that to me a little better?
This kind of floor tile that is on the floor of this room is something that, as I mentioned, the MSBA excludes. So that is, I was pulling off the amount on the eligible amount, but there's another VAT tile.
I'm actually looking for the total amount to demolish the building and to pay for the hazardous abatement, whatever you want to call it. Total, all-inclusive number to demolish the school and haul it away.
Okay. The cost for the VAT abatement is $241,000.
So $241,000 on top of that?
Yes, plus markup, so $276,000.
Okay. So we're basically...
In addition to the, $1,088,000.
So we're around $1,360,000, $1,354,000. Right around there?
I would say $1,360,000, right? Some of those costs would be required because no matter what you would do in this building, even if you were to just continue to be in the building at some point.
If we continue to be in the building, you're saying that...
At some point, we will need to remove some of the hazardous materials, yes.
Why is that?
Because as they become friable, it's required to be removed.
Right. Thank you. The next question is, it was reported that there was a spill of about 77,000 gallons. This has been out there for a long time, and I had asked the question, how many cubic yards of sand would it take to absorb 77,000 gallons of oil?
We have our RSP right here, so we're going to give us
If we could, we have our licensed site professional here with us this evening, Ralph
If
Teller,
you could speak,
and love to have him address some of these questions.
please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was asked to review the existing activity and use limitation with respect to the proposed design. I don't know where the figure of 77,000,
It was actually on some
Yeah.
DEP records that was shown.
I'm not aware of that volume. I don't know where that number came from, to be honest with you. That's a pretty sizable volume of oil.
Yeah.
But what is established is what is remaining in the ground. Initially, there was emergency response actions taken back in that, shortly after that spill was identified, to remove some of the free product. So, what's left now would be a substantially less amount than what you were addressing.
Could you tell us maybe even how many cubic yards of sand it would actually take to maybe absorb 100 gallons of oil?
The nature, first, it's important to understand that the nature of the oil that was released was a heavy oil, number 4, number 6 oil. That's almost like a tar. It's not going to spread very far from the point at which it was released. So, but as that...
Just let him finish, Give him respect. Go ahead, sir.
No, well, so that would greatly make a big difference in trying to estimate how many cubic yards of sand would be capable of absorbing that. In any event, that's not what you have. In the ground. I'm not sure where the question's going to, because what's in the soil is not sand.
Okay. I was out there every day when they were drilling, and I actually come from a background of drilling and blasting, so I'm pretty familiar with drills. And I believe the reason why those gentlemen spoke up is because there's documentation that not only is there number 4 and number 6 oil there, there's also number 2 oil. And so we'd just like to get this right. We feel as though it's a serious matter. Actually, Mr. O'Reilly, who happens to be my old baseball coach, he actually is an abutter to the site. He actually has a private well, and sorry to say that his wife has passed away not too long ago of cancer. So this is a personal, this is very personal to some people, and it's concerning. And we think that leaving the oil there and going about this, as some people might call it, a cavalier approach, and maybe even an irresponsible approach, is not the right way to go about it. So if we could get that question answered so that we can, as a community, help evaluate this thing, even if it's personally, tell us how many cubic yards of sand, worst case scenario, number 2 oil, would it take to, say, absorb 100 gallons of number 2 oil, worst case scenario?
I could certainly run that calculation for you, but I'm not sure that's going to address your concerns, to be blunt. Because I think what you're really concerned about is what's in the ground now, and does it have the potential or capability to migrate in groundwater in a dissolved state and reach those private wells. That's pretty much it in a nutshell?
It goes a little beyond that. If there is this large volume down there, okay, and if you guys would be kind enough to bring up on the screen where the AUL is. Okay. As you can see, there's a dotted line there, a red dotted line. That happens to be the existing school. Now, some of you are aware of this. For those who are not aware of this, we actually demolished the old high school, the old Swain School, and it's been reported that in the basement of that, we were getting water in the basement. And we know that where the senior center is, it's a hill. So the water is coming off that hill. And so it's my thought that if this school gets demolished, the school is right now acting as a dam to keep that water pressure from going in toward where that oil spill is. So it's my fear that we knock the school down, we have that great of a volume. Not only are we going to be worrying about Mr. O'Reilly's well, but we're actually going to be possibly threatening a tributary, a wetland tributary to other people's water supplies. So I think it's a serious concern. I think going about this as rapidly as we've been going about this and taking this subject as lightly as it's been taken, I'm not comfortable with it. I happen to be the one, like I said, that was going out there every day talking to the drillers. And I happen to be the one who had the laboratory collection vials that when they did hit the oil, when it did start gushing out of the ground, I collected it. I happened to be on my way down to the Board of Health with it. They started yelling at me, hey, you shouldn't be taking that. I was more concerned about my community than I was the drillers, so I decided to head down to the Board of Health with it. They called the police. 2 police officers pulled me over, stopped me, and confiscated the oil. They went about trying to press charges saying I stole the oil. But the court, from what I was told by Lieutenant Desmond, found that there was no probable cause. So the oil now in the collection vial sits in the evidence room at the police station. Now that's important, and let me explain why it's important. Because where I got that oil happens to be from the spot that was supposed to have been cleaned up. There's no way there's no way I should have been able to get oil from an area that was supposed to have been cleaned up. So that there is a serious issue. I think that's enough to put the brakes on this thing. Now, with regard to the cost of the school, I am not happy with the cost of the school. I think it is major league bloated, and I brought something tonight that I hope you'd all take advantage of, and that is a cost estimating tool. It happens to be a website. It's www.reedconstructiondata.com, and it's pretty easy to navigate. You go to the website, you click on cost estimating, then you click on RS means quick cost estimates. You scroll down to the high school section, then you click on the index of high school models by state, and you could actually go to Boston. And you could actually see various schools with materials. As a matter of fact, they even have union labor costs. In addition to that, there's the bells and whistles version with brick face and limestone and that sort of thing. So I hope that if anybody here would like to do a little self-investigating, that if you can just remember this website, reedconstructiondata.com, and use this as a tool to help you make a responsible decision and evaluate if this cost is legitimate or if we're being gouged. I happen to think it's not in our best interest. Now, another aspect of this...
Mr. McDonald, well, just one comment is, this is all going out to bid, so it's going to be, to the lowest bidders.
Okay. So what are you trying to tell me?
Well, that website can give you the estimated cost, but it's not going to be the actual cost. Again, it's going to be estimated. The actual will be what comes back on the bids.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Now, for those of us, for those here who think that all of us are against a school, I want you to understand something. We're not against a school. We're not against education. We just want to get it done right. And there are some of us that think that there is another site that a school would be best to be built on. Some of us feel we could have our own hockey rink. Some of us could have a swimming pool. And not only have those things, but have those things even at a lesser cost than what we're being asked to pay for this school. I'd like to point out a couple things about this school that I actually have a problem with. If you can see the inner courtyard here, this area right here. As you know, this winter, we had a lot of snow. I think there was one storm was like 4 feet of snow. Snow is going to have to be removed from that area. But let me show you how it's going to have to be removed from that area. You got to go through a doorway, down a hallway, and the land slopes down. Then you're going to have to go down a set of stairs. And then you're going to have to find a place to get rid of the snow. So that doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well with me doing that, and it doesn't sit well with me leaving the snow there, because it's going to eventually work its way into the school. And if you'd be kind enough to bring up some classroom areas that you spoke about. The ones where you want the kids in the corridor? Yeah. This area here where they were suggesting put the kids in the corridor. Personally, I think it's a disaster. I don't even think it's legal, especially when you're talking about emergency fire access. Can you just imagine a group of kids with desks in the middle of a hallway, and then you have to have a fire evacuation? It's a disaster. It's just, it doesn't make sense. Could you put also some picture of the classroom showing the glass? I don't know about you guys, but I did my share of goofing off in high school, and I tell you right now, one of the things we would have loved is having this in our school, because I can just imagine what we could have been, what signs we could have been given to the other class. It's just a major, major distraction. It's a disaster. I mean, it might be good if you're going to educate kids on, maybe a comedy show or something like that, but, this is just not in our best interests. A couple other things I want to talk about. People have said that this is a two-step process. The first is a Proposition 2.5 override. People want to call it a debt exclusion. We'll call it a debt exclusion. I actually brought this little graphic for you because the way it's worded, if you actually carefully read the way that the article is worded, it actually gives them an open checkbook. And I'm encouraging people to think deeply about that, and I'm asking people not to exempt the town of Wilmington from the provisions of Proposition 2.5. The vote happens to be on December 6th, and I'm just encouraging people to not give them an open checkbook. It's just not what we want to do.
Mr. McDonald?
Yeah.
A couple more minutes and then...
Okay. The other issue that I'm concerned about, if you'd be kind enough to put up the area that shows that auxiliary field, practice field, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Yeah, right there. Okay, that area, I guess it would be in the northeasterly direction. Happens to be our cemetery. And after doing a little investigation on our cemetery, And on our population, the most recent annual report shows that our population is 22,809 people. And the remaining cemetery plots equal 1,540, which is less than 7% of the population. It meets less than 7% of the cemetery needs in our community. Now, we happen to own that land where that field is being proposed, which, in my opinion, the best possible use for that is for a cemetery expansion. Now, if we end up putting that field there, then we have to go to a remote location to provide for our cemetery expansion needs. And financially, I don't think that makes sense. In addition to that, that new field is an easement that goes through that. Mr. O'Reilly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's an access or pedestrian easement or something like that? Yes. Anyways, there's an easement that goes through it, so it's a problem. So I would hope that people will actually take this into consideration, look at the financial aspects of it, and
Mr. McDonald, thank you for your comments, and I'd like to get more people from the audience to,
this was kind of a major point.
you've had quite a bit of time. I'd like to get more comments from the other members.
Okay, I'll let people comment, and then I could maybe finish up at the end or something.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Peter Moser from Aldrich Road. I have 3 brief financial questions. So the Article 1 mentions the MSBA amount at 52 and some change percent, and I think that's up to 55%, but I think it's based on maybe a more complicated calculation of different costs at different rates. So my question is, have they committed to that structure? I saw that they approved it. Does that mean they've committed to the program?
They have committed to the program and to the structure that I described earlier, and they have committed to a maximum grant of $37,993,000, $37,993,245. They have committed that money, and when they do that, there's an agreement with the town, and they set aside that money, and then it gets reimbursed on a monthly basis throughout construction.
Okay. The second question, the mechanics of the way the tax will occur, I'm not sure I understand it. So I saw like an average impact on the homeowner, and it's based on a 25-year rate. So is this like a rider on the property tax for that time period after which it goes away?
It is only for the period, only for the 25 years, and then it does go away, yes.
Okay. And last question, operating costs. Have we looked at differences in operating costs between the present building and the new one?
I'll defer that to the school department.
Mr. Carr? Mr. Carr?
Mrs. Bent, we'll do it in stereo, if that's okay. We have looked at the operating costs, and we believe that we're able to absorb any increase. We don't think there's going to be all that much of an increase because of the efficiencies that are designed into the building. Obviously, it's a building that's going to be about 40,000 square feet more than the current building, and so we believe it'll require an additional technical maintenance person because of the technology, the computer technology involved in the maintenance of the building. But we don't anticipate any additional staff beyond that on the maintenance and operations side. And we also believe that we want to bring natural gas to the site, and we think that that's going to be a whole lot less expensive for us than the way the building is currently heated. In addition, everything is going to be energy efficient from the windows, the mechanicals. So we think we're positioned okay to handle any slight increase in cost. I don't know about Mrs. Benton can speak to the educational end.
With regard to the educational program, it is our hope and expectation that we will be able to bring students, special ed students who are out of district back into the system. So actually, we hope to see a huge savings. I'll give the example of 5 students out of district placement Annual tuition for each of those students is roughly $120,000. We're hoping to set up a program in the new high school with a teacher, an aide, and operating costs would come to roughly $95,000, so we're looking at a net savings of almost $400,000 in bringing back those students to Wilmington High where they should be because they live in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, yes.
If you indulge me a minute, I did write down quite a bit of what Mr. McDonald had to say, and I have to respond to a couple of things which, quite frankly, is misinformation. And some of these questions have been asked in the past, and they have been answered. So I'll try once again to answer this. The statement keeps being made that the oil was gushing out of the ground. That just is not possible. As you heard tonight, there was number 4, number 6 oil down there, which is like molasses, which is unable to really move anywhere, never mind up. What happened there was that when the drill goes down and to take its sample during the testing phase done through our LSP, water is put down there to help clean out the casing. When the water went down there, when oil was encountered, and they pulled the drill rig up, water came up with some oil which tainted the water. That was not oil gushing. That was water that mixed with oil that's been sitting in the ground for 25 years. When we did the testing on the site, the AUL limits which you see by that pink oval appear quite large. We've kept the AUL limits that's as depicted in the original study. We actually found that it was smaller than what's up there now. So there's been no migration to date. It's actually smaller than what was originally depicted through the AUL document. In terms of the cost estimate and the information that was provided on the board up here, that's all well and good for projects which may have been bid recently in the past in Massachusetts, in New Hampshire, we don't know where. The information that we developed is based upon current construction costs in the public market in Massachusetts, looking at a number of projects that are ongoing and forecasting forward as to what the cost may be by the time we bid our project. So they're not just dollars that reflect today's market, they're also taking into consideration what the market's going to be 6, 8, 12 months from now. So this isn't just grabbed off a website. These are paid professionals looking at this building in a lot of detail to make sure we're as accurate as possible with our estimate. In terms of the snow in the courtyard, yes, it's going to snow into the courtyard. And if we have any snow like we had last year, there's a chance that we'll be removing snow from the roof. If any snow goes into that courtyard, there's a full drainage system which will allow that to melt and run away. If it's something that overburdens that particular courtyard, yes, there would be an emergency access through the building to allow it to go from the courtyard out beyond. And then lastly, I just need to address the student learning in the corridors. The way the spaces are set up, I guess we can talk about the glass at the same time. There are alcoves which are cut out around these small group learning spaces. And yes, there is glass which is allowing you to see through. Today, students are very curious and they're very quizzical and they want to know what's happening in all the other spaces around them. Teachers don't want to be isolated. They want to be able to interact with and collaborate with their fellow teachers. So this is a proven idea which allows for that to occur. The alcoves that you see here in no way interrupt the emergency egress within those buildings. These are spaces where you could have 2 or 3 students sitting in chairs or working at a table outside of a space, so you essentially make a small classroom space in unused space. So this is an idea to make the building more flexible to allow for more learning to occur within the walls that we create. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Reilly?
I have a question, and it's on the soccer field, I guess, and it's the right-of-way. On the plot plan, it reads, right-of-way shown on plan in Plan Book 99, Plan 72, like 728, status of right-of-way unknown, possibly extinguished by common ownership law. I'd like to do that so that you'll all see it.
Thank you, sir.
That's a falsehood. And I would like to know if I sent a letter off to Nitschke asking them where they got that information, and did they do it themselves, or did someone in the town of Wilmington authorize it? And that's a question for you, and I'd like you to find out and get back to me at some time. You don't have to do it tonight. But find out who it was that said that the right-of-way is not there. Every deed going back to, I got a map of 1869 that shows that right-of-way. It's there. Every deed that I found, it shows up. Protecting two people, protecting the town and protecting the ownership, the people who own the property. The most recent one acquired the land by eminent domain. That was a dividing point between the lots. When the developer wanted to develop, he was restricted by the right-of-way, passageway, whatever you want to call it. And it became a bone of contention to me because he got 2 lots of land on 150-foot frontage, assuming 6 feet of my property. And I asked the Attorney General for an answer on that. Did the town of Wilmington pay for, in the court judgment, did the town of Wilmington pay for 2 lots of land where only one it was only 150 feet? And all the plot plans that I've seen by Andela and the Murphys show a line intruding into my property by 6 feet. And you can get back to me in that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And another thing, when they're talking about the oil, my research tells me that dissipated oil becomes more dangerous sitting in the ground than hard oil flowing, that the oil that is there, that flows off in the bedrock, I think in front of the high school is 25 feet, and in my backyard it's 43 feet. So you can go from the Gazelle School, so that's the slope of that much. And I think Mr. McDonald pointed out that's contained right now. But once the ground is cracked, that's all going to flow. And I have great concern. We have a well, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Joe Marie O'Mahony, Albany Street in Wilmington. I just wanted to first thank the people of this committee, the building committee, the school committee, the selectmen, Mr. Kyra, Mrs. Benton, for the unbelievable work that they've done in putting this plan together. I don't think it's cavalier. I don't think it is rushed. I think it is well thought out. And I appreciate the fact that we have these professionals in our town to give us this information, to answer these questions, and to present this to us and to make themselves so available so that any questions can be answered. I think I've heard the same answers now for the past year, and to me consistency means a lot. But I have to also just say, I'm offended right now, and I'm an attorney, so it takes a lot to get me offended. I chose a profession that has thousands of jokes, and I was going to ignore the fact that I work in a court system where the Khmer interpreters are probably the most sought-out interpreters in our court system right now, at least where I work. I was going to ignore that the word estimated was offensive, yet we were being referred to a website where some computer algorithm was going to give us an estimate. But I can't ignore the fact that we have now been presented with an alternative that instead of a new high school, our town might need an expanded cemetery. That offends me no end. It offends me as a citizen of this town. It offends me as the mother of 4 children in this town. I am more than happy to be buried anywhere. I hear there's a farm available. Maybe that could be an ancillary cemetery, but I'm unbelievably offended right now that it would even be suggested that we should deprive our future, our children, we should rob them of the ability of having the best possible facility to get educated in this town for the possibility that we might need a bigger cemetery. And I just wanted that to be noted because I believe if other people are hearing this, their heart's probably racing as much as mine is. So I just hope you would consider that there are many of us out here. We may not be knocking on doors and we may not have poster boards with us everywhere, but we're just as committed to this new high school as other people are to this oil situation that frankly is going to be addressed one way or another. And my concern is if this gets voted down, we're going to inherit a bigger issue because we have an accreditation issue with the existing high school. We have this oil situation. It's not just going to disappear with a no vote. It's something we as a town are going to have to deal with. And frankly, I don't have a big enough pocketbook to not have the state's help right now. We are in economic trouble right now, and any help we can get from the state to preserve and create something that we're not hopefully going to need to deal with for another 50 years, I say, where do I sign up? So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. West?
Hi, good afternoon. Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road, former Wilmington Selectman. I know at town meeting there was a comment, they were talking when they talked about should the town manager live in town or not, and there was a comment made that, do you have any skin in the game? And I have some skin in the game regarding the high school and some other things going on. I have 2 kids, one in the high school now, one in the middle school. I'm a taxpayer. I own rental property, and I own a business. We just heard tonight, I don't know if you guys were aware or not, but the super committee failed, which means that over the next 10 years, $1.2 trillion is going to come off the budget. Half for defense, half for social programs. They said that what's going to happen is starting in January, if the Congress doesn't do something, they said that the tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts that are, I guess, going to go away, will mean that the average taxpayer will now, on his income tax, will pay an extra $956. So, and as far as the rent from rental property, I think that the more that we're taxed, the choices that we have are to raise our rent, raise the value of the rents, which is going to hurt people even more. You're probably going to go for this project, and as a finance committee, here at 47% reimbursement, it's probably a great deal. Am I going to vote for it? No. And I'm sorry to disappoint the people in this audience that were just applauding somebody that is supporting. But my reasonings aren't that, hey, the school was good enough for me, so it's good enough for my kids. I think that, I graduated from Wilmington High School in 1980, and people have said to me, oh, you want to preserve the high school because it's the high school that you were once comfortable with. Well, to be honest with you, most of the high school that is across the street is not the high school that I went to. Where the industrial arts labs are, where the industrial arts section were, is now our gym. That was done about 25 years ago. The windows were all done over. Where I had drafting is now the science labs. Where classrooms were is now the library. Where the library is now classrooms. With the et cetera, et cetera. Do I think the school needs work? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I think that it needs an $87 million facelift? Unfortunately, with this economy, and I just think it's going to be really tough for the average citizen to, even though it's like another $200 a year in taxes or whatever. Well, it's $200 plus whatever we're going to charge. Whatever your finance committee is going to assess us for taxes for next year. What I would hope is that maybe with some of the benefits, as Mrs. Benton, and by the way, Mrs. Benton, you've done a phenomenal job with my kids and your school has. And I say that before all the teachers, and you know yourself that that my family has talked to you many a time on different issues regarding that. Anyhow, what I'd like to see is that I think that if there could be other things done that would help modernize the existing structure, that could be done more over in time, because from what I understand right now, we have $9 million in free cash. Could we use some of that free cash to do things like put in the sprinkler systems, and, you know, and do some upgrades to the school. And if you need to do, you know, through the tax process, charge us something, you know, that's fine. A couple of quick questions that I have of the committee, of the Finance Committee are, say for the next 5, maybe 10 years downstream, do you guys see any major items that we're going to need to pay for, aside from normal maintenance? Do you see anything that, any showstoppers here from that, you know, say 5, 10 years downstream?
That would basically be up to the town manager and the selectmen to bring the budget for what they're planning to us, then for us to review it, and then give it back to the community. So if the town manager or the selectmen decide to build a new town hall or a new fire building, whatever, it start with them and then come to us.
Okay, now when I was on the Board of Selectmen, we did have a 5-year plan. So I don't know if either the manager or the selectmen, is there a 5-year plan today that could be referred to?
Mr. Kyra?
We would be primarily looking at making renovations where necessary to improve the school, similar to what we just did at the Shawshene School, as an example, when we put in all the new windows and certain doors at the Shawshene School through the Green Repair Program. So we would try to leverage our money, the monies available against grants. We're looking to make acquisitions of property to expand the town's inventory for recreation and open space, as an example. There is no plan at this time to build a new town hall, but we are looking at the possibilities of a substation. And again, the funding that we are putting in place through our operational reserves is similar to what we have done in the past to make sure that we have enough money to withstand any kind of problem within our operating budgets, and to be able to make purchases without having to borrow. So sure, there are going to be, I'm not sure what the term you used, Mr. West. You used a particular term. I guess it's a state-of-the-art term. I'm not sure what it was or what you meant by that. I'm not sure either. I'm sure someone will come up with it. But we do intend to continue to upgrade, for example, our municipal fleet, similar to the tower, the aerial tower that was purchased. We intend to do a lot of this without the necessity of borrowing. So that's what we're looking at. Do we have another major scheduled outlay similar to the high school on the horizon? I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. Just a couple of quick final comments now.
Frank, hold on. Mr. Hayden has a question.
Oh,
for you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hayden.
Hi, Frank, how are you?
Good evening.
I guess I'd ask the question, if we don't do it now, when would we do it? Do you think this building will last another century, 2 centuries? So I realize that's a loaded question, very difficult to ask, but it then brings up the whole aspect that if we have to do it 10 years from now, will we have any state money to do it at that time? Will we have a favorable borrowing climate to do it at that time? And what will the kids that have to go for 10 more years, what kind of a price will they pay? I have 15 grandchildren in Wilmington, and 11 of them are still in the school system, and so I'm very interested in what we do here. And I'm very sensitive to costs. We all have to pay the costs. But I asked that question, if you have some kind of an answer, magic pill or something that you can stick in the water, and all of a sudden we can go for the next 20 years, that's great. But what's going to happen is some people want to put it off for 5 years because they don't want to pay for it. And somebody else will say, let's put it off 10 years. It won't happen. We'll be going back to this high school, if not this year, next year, the year after. And unfortunately, when we do that, there may not be any state money. Thank you.
No, I understand, Mr. Hayden, and as an example, like you were saying about the expenses now, one of the items that's included in the high school field that we're talking about is an AstroTurf football field. Now, what is the life of that, sir? What's the life
I've
of...
heard there about 15 years. I'm not an expert.
And what's the replacement cost?
You mean for to replace the turf field? Or
Sure. The comment you had made was that if we don't do it now, we'll do it, when do we do it later? And you were talking about cost. So I was saying, okay, if you got an AstroTurf field that you said is going to last about 15 years, what's the replacement cost, say, in today's dollars for that field that's going to fail in 15, maybe 20 years?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I think when they were looking, weren't they looking at the better part of $1 million?
Oh, for the field now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think it's about $1 million. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I think it's about $1 million.
Yeah, right, and the point that I'm trying to make, sir, is that we're building this brand-new school, and 15 years from now, we're going to be, 15, maybe 20 years, hopefully, we're going to be building, we're going to be replacing the AstroTurf field at the cost of $1 million at today's rate. Is that an understandable argument?
Sure.
And the cost of maintaining an existing football field, for example, for the next 15 years, would be what?
I don't know.
Yes.
If I could help out. Sure. Certainly, there's an initial cost to put the field in because you have to do all the subgrade drainage and things of that nature and put the carpet down, the synthetic turf. Over the 12 to 15 years, maintenance will be minimal. Certainly, maintenance is involved, but it'll be minimal. It's not the cost of irrigation. It's not the cost of fertilizers, things of that. So that's money that can be banked. When it comes of age, say in 15 years, it might be about $350,000 to replace the carpet itself. So if you're anticipating that, you're banking some money away to replace that down the road.
Yeah. But the thing is that, thank you, sir. I think that in answer to your question, Mr. Hayden, is that, in my estimation, is that instead of knocking the building down, starting from scratch, and we're going to be dealing with these similar maintenance issues 15 years from now, like the middle school. The middle school is, 10-odd years old, and it's going to start having some projects going on probably within the next 10 years. You're probably going to be looking, probably at a new roof or upgraded heating system, hackback system, or whatever it is. I mean, these are normal maintenance issues, and the high school, in my eyes, is just another example of a normal maintenance issue. The other question that I had was that regarding both the carnival and the fireworks for the 4th of July week, I'm told that from the high school perspective, that would probably be non-existent, at least at where it's at now. I don't know if you guys had a comment on that or not.
I've heard different comments on it, but Mr. Carter, would you like to field that question?
The July 4th activities as we know it will take place this year, 2012. Beyond that, we're working to determine how we can best continue the July 4th activities and to what extent we can provide a family-oriented July 4th program. We're looking right now as to where we would be able to run fireworks, for example. As far as the carnival is concerned, that may not be in the cards to the extent that the carnival is right now. I'm not so sure that's a bad thing from the town's perspective, but the fact is we are going to do whatever we can to continue the core of the 4th of July activities, which is fireworks and family programs. And that's the commitment that the town has. Obviously, it's going to be different than the way it is right now, beginning in 2013, if the school passes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carter. The reason why I mentioned that is because that whole flavor, and again, it's been going on for maybe 25 years, and town's been around for 280 years, I guess it is, or so. But that being said, is that's kind of a flavor of the town, and one of the things that people like to see about the town. When you start talking about like where the tennis courts are and all those community activities, to me, that's part of learning too. You have the kids and the adults are interacting. They're making hamburgers or whatever it is. They're changing money. They're dealing with people. And to me, it's a hands-on learning experience that I'd hate to see go away. And the other thing with that is that the money they earn goes back to our kids, goes back to our community, goes back to the scholarships and all the different programs that these nonprofits run for our kids. So again, I've taken up a lot of time, and I've probably taken up too much. As a finance committee, I think you probably don't have a choice. You probably have to go for this. But my humble opinion is that if possible, even if you go for it, and even if it gets approved through the town, if possible, I'd like to see the town see what they can do to help the residents and help the businesses. I'm a business owner here also. And I was affected by an oil spill, by the way, and had to clean it up by DEP at an insurance cost of $325,000. But anyhow, the oil issue isn't my issue with the site. But like I say, if you can do something that would help the residents out, times are tough, they're not going to get any better for a while, and wherever the chips lay, that's wonderful. If the school goes through, that's hey, it's probably a great thing for our kids. I don't and I hope it is. But if it doesn't go through, I don't think that's a vote to do nothing and to be stagnant. I think what that is that that's a vote that the economy's tough. Instead of the $47 million or whatever it's going to be for the taxpayers, I think with that, in my eyes, it's a vote to renovate, improve the educational programs in our school, and maybe and do what we can to modernize the building as time allows. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Benton?
I just wanted to respond to Mr. West is saying postpone. If you postpone this project, the high school will lose accreditation. Right now, every month, we have been told that if the repairs are not made to the high school, we will lose accreditation, and that will affect your children. To do a renovation, we went through the whole process, and it came to close to the same amount as building a new high school. Why am I opposed to a renovation? It will not give us the classroom sizes that we need in order to provide the education that our students deserve. Yes, it's hard times. Yes, it's a lot of money. But you will not see $37 million being handed over if we do a renovation. The MSBA has already approved this project. They did not approve a renovation. And I understand how difficult it is to make ends meet. But I believe that this is a once in almost a lifetime. I do not, if this is turned down, we go back to the bottom of the list. There are 351 school districts ahead of us, and many school districts wanting to do something to improve the educational program for their students. And Wilmington will not come up in the near future. So yes, we do need to sacrifice. Yes, it is going to be hard. But not doing it, to me, is going to be a huge detriment to Wilmington because we will lose students to private high schools. We will lose young families who will not buy houses in this town if they have a high school that's not accredited. I'm not trying to give scare tactics. I'm just, my opinion, the facts. We owe it to our students to have an accredited high school, and I would hate to see that put in jeopardy. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. West.
I agree wholeheartedly with the accreditation issue. I looked on the state's website, and I believe that right now there are 6 high schools that have lost their accreditation. There are 6 high schools that in Massachusetts that have recently regained their accreditation. And I believe from the website that I read, which is from the Wilmington 4.0 site, it's a 2010, what's the board that runs that? New England Association of Schools and Colleges. They said that at any given time, there's between 100 and 110 schools that are in danger or being advised that they could lose their accreditation. Do I think it's a scare tactic? No, I think it's real. But I do think that with improving the educational programs in town, and Mrs. Benton, as I said, the school system does a phenomenal job. And I mean, some of the programs that they run in the town are phenomenal. The programs they run in the school. So I'm not taking away from anything that they've done or can do. But all I'm suggesting is that, like I said, there's 6 towns that have lost their accreditation recently, 6 towns that have recently gained their accreditation, and the website said that there's 110 that are threatened with that issue. So you know, again, do I want to see us lose our accreditation? Absolutely not. But are there other ways that we can improve our accreditation? You know, for example, like the library program, I know Mr. Hayes was talking about the automating the library so they're not in a card catalog. And again, I know it's a very minor thing, but there are things like that that can help improve, you know, help our scores far to maintain our accreditation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Kane?
Peggy Kane, Chairwoman of the School Committee. Dawn, would you mind putting up the money one, the thing? I'm really flabbergasted by the argument about how much this is going to cost us. I think people aren't getting the message here as far as how much it's individually going to cost us. If we look down to average cost to homeowner, 25-year bond, at the top of the cost, $164.14 your first year. And then, Mr. Carra, it goes down proportionally?
That's 164 is the average.
The average. Oh, okay. But we are talking about the average person in Wilmington for the first year is going to pay $164.14 or somewhere in that vicinity. We are not talking about us all owing $4,000 every year, or $3,000, or $2,000. We're not talking that. So what I don't understand is why people are afraid of the cost of this. I feel really convinced that the school building committee did an outstanding job with the people that we have hired, with the information that we've gotten, with the decisions that have been made, and we have ended up coming to this town and saying, you can have an $81 million project, $38 million of which you are contributing to. If you don't contribute and take that money, someone else is going to get that money, and your money, your taxes at work, are going to go to another community, the next community on the list. So I don't think people have understood this, that we are going to each individually be paying such a minimal amount for an $81 million school. And we are going to be so proud as a community that we've been able to do this for our children, for our community. This is a community effort. It is the right thing to do. People should not, I have to just add this one other thing. It's one thing to be opposed to something and to stick to the facts, but when we're constantly being insulted, and I have to say the school building committee has taken more than enough knocks for doing this. We've had over 24 meetings. They've all been open to the public. Nobody is trying to pull anything over anybody's eyes, and I really resent when people are making aspersions against that committee. It's not fair. We've tried to bring the best project that we could to the taxpayers, and I, for one, think that we've done an excellent job. And I hope that we really keep in mind how much we are actually going to pay as individual taxpayers in the town. And for what we're going to get, it's the best deal in town. It's the best deal of the year. So good luck to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kane. Yeah.
Good evening, Lisa Johnson, Aldridge Road. I'd just like for all of us to just take a step back for a moment and think about the community we have. The young and the really young do for the elderly. The elderly do for the young, okay? We have an amazing community. What I would say is for anyone who is considering a no vote to walk through the high school, it is an embarrassment. When I say we're such a wonderful community, I'm so proud to be a part of this, and I walk through the high school and think that there are actually people out there that are part of this wonderful community and want to vote no, I would say please walk through the high school. I'm saddened each time I do so. So to that, I just want to say everyone's doing an amazing job, even those who are doing their research to try to sway people toward the no vote. But if you are leaning that way, please walk through the high school. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Shampoo.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I don't want to restate everything. Michael Shampoo, I'm a member of your Board of Selectmen. I'm not on the high school building committee, and so as an elected member of the Board of Selectmen, it's really incumbent upon me to take the information from the experts and process it and ensure that what we're getting is accurate and complete. And I have been completely comforted and have felt very assured through this entire process, which has been going on, frankly, for a couple of years now, that this has been an exhaustive process, starting when we first started looking at the entire school system all the way up through today, where we are on the footsteps of hopefully voting in favor of this. I'm very much in favor of this project and voting yes on both dates because I believe that it is doing something for our community and for our youth. I think another speaker said we should do something for our kids, we should do something for the future. This is something that we're doing. I feel as a legacy to the next generations that this building, this complex will be an investment. And that's the segue that I wanted to make. We talk, that's not up there now, but I hear people talking about the costs. What are the costs to the community? Yes, there are some costs. There are some dollars that will be expended to make this happen. But we need to change the terminology here. This is not so much a cost, but an investment. And think about that. We all spend money. We all invest in mutual funds or 401k plans or other things in our life. That's money that comes out of your paycheck or out of your pocket and goes into some fund to generate something back, hopefully later when you retire or whatever. That's exactly how I wish you all would think of this and how I hope the people in the town of Wilmington will think of this. This is not a burdensome cost that's being thrust upon you, but rather an investment that will reap benefit. The absence of which will reap, that's where we'll have real costs. We'll have real costs if we don't do this because later we'll have to do it. And we've already heard that it's likely we probably won't have MSBA funding, but we'll have to do it to maintain our accreditation. So this is truly an investment. I heard a little while ago, there was some discussion about these are tough times. We shouldn't be looking at increasing taxes on our population during these difficult economic times. This is the time, folks, where we have an opportunity to take advantage of great rates and competitive construction values. This is the time for us to seize the wonderful situation that we as a community find ourselves in. Through great management over the course of the last couple of decades, we do have available free cash. We do have a AA+ bond rating. We are in this situation now as a community to be able to seize the opportunity of this bad economy. It's funny, in bad economies, the rich get richer, don't they? Well, Wilmington right now, folks, I hate to say we're rich, but we're in a lucky or in a fortunate position to be able to take advantage of that. Not every community would be able to do what we're facing right now, and we're able to do that because of our financial situation. So please, change the way you think about this, and change the way you speak about this to your friends and your colleagues in the community. This is not a cost burden. This is an investment for your future, the future of the next generation, frankly, for the future of this community on the whole. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from anyone else that hasn't been heard yet? Mr. McDonald?
I didn't think it was going to have to come to this, but it's come to this. This is what you call a nuclear option. And Mr. Doherty, would you be kind enough to just read a name on this paper for me? You're going to see arrows. Just read the name of the company that those arrows are.
Niche Engineering, Sandra Brock? Is that?
Yeah, just keep turning the pages and just keep reading that name.
What is this, Ms. McDonald?
That's a contract with the I think it was Doran Whittier, a list of all the subcontractors.
And your point is?
Well, would you just read what they do?
It's quite a few names.
No, just the ones with the arrow.
It's all one name, Mrs.
Niche
Brock.
Engineering? Okay.
Yeah. Your point is?
Mr. Kara, actually, Mr. Morris, I actually put in a public records request for the name of the bank where the town has its money, and it's Eastern Bank. Is that correct?
Town has money in several different banks.
Okay, well, niche engineering, well, I did some research, and the founding principal of niche is Judith Niche, and I noticed that she's also a board of director for Eastern Bank, which is where the town has its money, and to be perfectly honest with you, I would question that. I would question that if that's ethical and if it's a conflict of interest. The other thing, Mrs. Benton, I'm very upset that you said we were going to lose our accreditation. That's another scare tactic. I just want to, could you tell us the name of that company again? NEAS&C, correct? What's it stand for? New England Association of Schools and Colleges, okay? And they have donors, such as foundations, correct? Which it is correct. I checked it out today. One of the foundations that donate to them is called the Lumina Foundation. You ever hear of them? Lumina Foundation?
Mr. McDonald, where's this going? You're getting a little off subject here.
I'm very troubled when somebody scares my community and tells them that we're going to lose our accreditation when I see conflict of interest, because one of the board of directors for the company that we hired as a construction manager at risk happens to be a board of director on Gilbane, and she happens to be a board of director on the Lumina Foundation, which donates money to that organization that happens to be responsible for accreditation. I happen to question if it's a complete engineered scam to scare communities.
You're getting off point here, okay?
Okay, one last thing. Are there any representatives from Gilbane here tonight? Could you come up here, please? This happens to be your board of directors. Would you mind just holding that up?
Mr. McDonald, this is totally out of order. Totally out of order. Okay,
Well, Mr. Carr made the statement that his financial advisor is State Street, and I find that one of their board of directors, okay, happens to also be the board of directors for Gilbane. So I don't know about you guys, but I happen to have a problem with that. That might be the world we live in, but I'm not too comfortable with it.
Mr. McDonald,
I just wanted to
Mr.
share with
McDonald,
everybody
Mr.
that I'm not too
McDonald,
comfortable with that.
you're out of order.
Okay.
Please sit down, you're out of order.
The one last thing is a different subject.
No, you're out of order, Mr. McDonald.
Oh, this is a different subject. This is not out of order, I promise you. This happens to be a project in Woburn, okay? If you guys are familiar with...
McDonald, you're out of order.
Mr. Doherty, could I just ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Was there ever a time when you were business partners with Mr. Newhouse?
No, never.
You were never involved with Wilmington Community Television?
That's not a business partner, that's a nonprofit organization.
Oh, really? It's not owned by the town, right?
It's a nonprofit, sir.
Yeah, and you want to call me out of order?
Yes,
We have
I
a
do,
board of
sir.
sel-
You
we have
are
a
out
board of selectmen.
Mr. McDonald, you are out of order. Please sit down.
Mr. Doherty, all I wanted to say is...
You're out of order. Please sit down. Anyone else have any other comments on Articles 1 or 6? Mr. Kyra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so many different items were mentioned today, and I don't want anything to get short shrift as we go forward. And I appreciated Jo Marie O'Mahony indicating that that she was offended by a cavalier attitude and that the town was not taking this business seriously, particularly with regard to the AUL. We've taken that very seriously, and if the committee has any other questions about that, perhaps Mr. Teller can speak to what has taken place and what we've done, and not simply answer questions about how many tons of sand or pounds of sand it takes, totally irrelevant questions, but perhaps he can speak to specific issues if that's what the Finance Committee is looking for. One of the speakers indicated that if you voted for the debt exclusion on December 6th, that it gives the town an open checkbook. Of course, that's not true. The debt exclusion vote is a vote that does enable the town to raise funds in excess of the town's levy limit. And it is that very, very specific to this project. The checkbook comes on December 10th when the town determines whether or not to finance it. So the first part is to allow the town to tax in excess of the amount of the tax levy limit, which is a statute that's commonly referred to as Proposition 2.5, and in this case it's a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion. The actual content of the vote, it has to be approved by the Massachusetts School Building Authority and is constructed in a way that is consistent with what they're looking for as well as what the statute requires. And so that should be made very clear. There were some questions about the town's property with regard to the utility field, and it may very well have been encumbered by some other owner in the past, but the fact is there is only one owner there now, and that is the town of Wilmington. The town owns the property on Wildwood Street. There were numbers thrown out, and it's always interesting to me, despite the fact that we've given numbers, one speaker came up and said it's going to be an $87 million project, when in fact we're asking to borrow $81 million and change, and we've already indicated that the total amount of the project, when you add the $1,125,000 that was not borrowed, is $82 million and change, not $87 million. Somebody else said that the cost was going to be $200 a year on average, when clearly we've indicated that it was going to be $164. And we can also provide, if people are interested, what that cost would be for homes either less than the average or greater than the average. The questions arose about the turf field, and one of the great benefits that we have with regard to the turf field, which will likely last up to 20 years, and then be replaced at a far lower cost, as was indicated, or repaired, is that the community at large now will see one of their most pressing needs taken care of. You have 13 or 14 or 1,500 kids playing soccer, most of them on a Saturday over at the Shawsheen School. If anybody is involved at all with this community, I think they cannot dispute the fact that we need more fields, and the artificial field will enable us to use that field for all kinds of groups, and it's just as good as adding fields. That's what happens when you have an artificial turf. It was interesting, the question that I received on the 4th of July, when the questioner commented later as to how important it was that we continue to have the kinds of activities that he referred to. Those are all of the activities that we'll continue to have. We'll continue to have somebody flipping a hamburger. We'll continue to have nonprofit organizations celebrating in the Common with the 4th of July. We'll continue to have concerts on the Common in conjunction with the 4th of July. You know, the doll carriage parade and all of the other kinds of things that truly make what the 4th of July is about, as opposed to some of the other things that create so many problems and that provide us with so many budget busters as a result of those kinds of activities. So clearly we're going to continue to have the 4th of July as we know it. To suggest that there are conflicts because the town is using Eastern Bank, and somebody who is probably considered the most outstanding woman engineer in the country, in Judith Nitsch, and they have the largest woman-owned, I think, engineering firm in New England, because she happens to serve on the board of directors of Eastern Bank, is preposterous on its face. The fact is that we do business with Eastern Bank, who is the main depository for the vendor and payroll for the town of Wilmington. We do it based upon an RFP, and that's how they get selected. It has nothing to do with the board of directors, and in fact we were doing business with Eastern Bank before we went this route and found out that Judith Nitsch was going to be selected not by the town of Wilmington, but by Doran Whittier, who is the architect. So I just want to make it clear that everything that we've done has been done in accordance with state statute. That said, people can vote against this if they don't believe it's the right thing. I happen to think it's the right time and it's the right program. And the fact is that the town of Marshfield just voted for a new high school. So they're taking the money that we're spending and they're using it in Marshfield. I think it's time that we also get the benefit of our money and make sure that we get a share here in Wilmington, because the town of Wilmington deserves no less.
Thank you. The gentleman that wants to speak on the oil, Mr. Kyra volunteered you.
I think it might be helpful for the audience to understand some of the regulatory aspects involved in the placement of the activity and use limitation on a property where there's been a release of oil. The activity and use limitation is designed to prevent future exposure to soil. So that's all it does. It doesn't address groundwater and solute transport, as some of the oil might dissolve in groundwater and move. It doesn't address that. The engineer that placed the activity and use limitation on the property had to demonstrate, he had to provide a technical argument to DEP that groundwater was not an issue in order for him to reach closure. So the other important thing to understand is by law, by regulation, the DEP has to audit all sites that have activity and use limitations placed on it. And this has been through that auditing process. So my point is, if DEP had concerns about groundwater, they would have already been flagged and identified.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none? Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any questions or comments on Articles 1 or 6? Seeing none, we'll head on to Article number 2. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase, gift, or eminent domain the parcel of land located off Church Street in Wilmington containing approximately 10,299 square feet and shown on as Parcel X on a plan entitled Plan of Land First Baptist Church, 173 Church Street, Wilmington, Mass., Map 63, Lot 9, September 9th, 2011, on file with the Town Clerk's Office for the school purposes and other general municipal purposes, and further to see if the town will vote to appropriate, borrow, pursuant to any applicable statute, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for which such purpose, or take any other action related thereto. Mr. Kyra?
Mr. Chairman, the Board of Selectmen has entered into a contingent purchase and sale. This is directly related to the school project. It is a critical piece of the school project in that it enables us to buy a quarter of an acre of land from the Baptist Church, which heretofore has been allowing the town to use that property. By being able to acquire this property, it expands the site and our ability to site the school and use a greater amount of the facility. It increases our ability to make better use of the entire site. Obviously, since we have a contingent purchase and sale, we've had sign-off both from the Board of Selectmen and the church itself. We've established the sale price at $15,000, which will be taken from available funds. And we think this is a minor part of the entire project, but still a critical part.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any comments or questions on Article number 2? Seeing none, we'll go to Article number 3. To see if the town will vote pursuant to Chapter 40, Section 58 of the Massachusetts General Laws to authorize the town of Wilmington through its town manager and town council, A, to impose and record a lien against private real property for municipal charges that arise or have arisen from the trimming, cutting, and/or removal of trees or bushes at such property by the town's tree warden and his or her deputies, where I, such action is deemed necessary because the affected trees or bushes have been found to be obstruct, endanger, or hinder pedestrians or others traveling on public ways, and 2, such personnel have been duly authorized to take such action by recorded vote of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen pursuant to MGL Chapter 87, Section 5, and 3, the owner of such property has failed or refused to perform such trimming, cutting, or removal following a notice given to him or her by the town of Wilmington, and 4, the property owner has failed or refused to pay the amount of such charges when an invoice presented to him or her becomes due. Such municipal charges to include the cost of performing the work by or for the town of Wilmington and for any safety and/or security measures related to the performance of such work, and B, to add the remaining unpaid amount to such municipal charges to the property owner's next tax bill or take any other action related thereto. Mr. Kyra?
Mr. Chairman, the purpose of this article is to provide the town with a means to collect expenses that it incurs or has incurred to remove or otherwise deal with dangerous trees or other vegetation on private property. This law would apply only when the owner of that particular property does not address the problem and then fails to reimburse the town when the town addresses the problem. Essentially, this article would make it easier for the town to recoup any cost that it incurs as a result of the negligence of a property owner, similar to other laws that had been established long ago with regard to buildings. So this would refer more specifically to trees. And then as a result, it would keep the cost of dealing with the landowner's dangerous trees from being shifted to the taxpayer as a result of this lien.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments on Article number 3? Yes.
I just want to know more about the notice that is given to the residents. Does it include such, maybe some companies or the contact the town to remove the property? And also, when the tree or the limb is the cost to remove it is incurred way too much to that resident? Is there any sort of, like, if they're too indigent to pay for it?
Well, it's liened against the property so that they wouldn't have to pay for it until they sold the property. Yeah, and there is a process that we have to go through where the